Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working through this tutorial here from Microsoft. You can see the URL and the name of the page, so you can Google this. The first thing I will just kind of say right off the bat here is that we are in this class using .NET 7 to do this coding. If you're on version 8, you can switch to a version that matches. The default is it does go to 8, but I manually switched myself to 7. Uh, just putting that out. So maybe I should update at some point. But what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through this tutorial, and most of this is going to happen next week, by the way. But I did want to get you started because this is something you could hypothetically achieve on your own. And this is going to reinforce the stuff that we're reading in the book, and hopefully it'll be a more workable example that where we can get it to work, rather than struggle with definitions and guess at like what the URL should be. Now it says minimal APIs are intended to create HTTP APIs with minimal dependencies. They're great for microservices and apps that only want to include minimum files, features, and dependencies in a .NET Core, right? One thing that they do kind of go into, right, and I want you to notice, similarities to their book for one thing, and then dissimilarities as well. And I'm trying to get here to a reasonable zoom out level, and I think that's a pretty good level there. And they talk about what we're going to create here. So in other words, we're going to work with the verbs get, post, put, and delete, the basic CRUD operations, the verbs that we were talking about before. And you'll notice they have a little description of what it's going to do. So the first one's going to get all the to-do items. The other one's going to get the completed ones. Notice how the URL is structured on that, right? To get an item by ID. So whenever you see this, that's going to be injected, right? So at the URL level, to add a new item. And notice the only difference here is to do a post. And I think that's really kind of fascinating compared to what we were just looking at. To update an existing item and then to delete an item. So hopefully we'll get through all of these. Now the prereqs are listed here. So like, what do you need in Visual Studio to make this work? Now all of you have this already. So you need to have the .NET and web development module installed. That's the only dependency really. And that one should be installed. And if you're using Visual Studio Code or for the Mac, you can check your dependencies there. All right. Well, so let's try the first couple of steps to get rolling. I am going to go to Visual Studio. I'm going to close down. In fact, I'm going to actually start fresh. I'm just going to close Visual Studio, relaunch, and then build a new project. It's almost faster than going into the menus and selecting things. They do want us to build an ASP.NET Core empty project, which I have the template handily sitting right there. Let's see if they give us the next screen here. They want us to call this to-do API and select next. All right. We are going to work. Okay, so to-do API and next. They want us to select .NET 7. They want us to configure HTTPS. Okay, I'm going to go with it this time. Not super crazy about doing that, but I'm going to do it just to make sure that everything is synced. So we're going to go ahead and click create. And you can see it launching here. I'm going to go ahead and click ignore here on that screen if you get that. First thing they want us to do is examine the code, right? So it says should contain the following code in the program.cs file. So let's click on the program.cs file and see that it indeed looks the same. They do want us to do a build and run. Okay, so like whenever you do a fresh application and you just run it, even though it's got like nothing in it, it's called a clean build, right? That's what we call it. And why do we do that? Because it builds a lot of the binaries that sit behind the application in the background that we're going to be calling on continuously so they're ready to roll. So let's just do that. Let's just make sure it works and runs. So it should launch your browser, get your web server going, and say hello world. Right. So been here before. I'm going to go ahead and close the browser now and come back to Visual Studio. Let's look at the next instruction. They talk about how you run the app, right? I think we're okay with this part so far, right? Control F5 to run without the debugger. And by the way, I don't know if that's always a good idea, but in our old textbook that we used to use, they always would push it, run without debugging, run without debugging. I'm not usually a huge fan of doing that because if there's a problem, I want to know. But sometimes web apps will have problems with the programming code and not have problems with stuff that pushes to the browser. If you do get a security warning, right, it tells you how to work past it. Basically, you don't want to install the certificate because it's temporary. For a local web server is kind of the general rule of thumb. Right, so now we will go ahead here and it says add NuGet packages. So let's do that step. So it says from the tools menu, select NuGet package manager and then click on the browse tab. All right, so we're going to go to the tools menu. We're going to go to the NuGet package manager. And we don't want the console. We want to manage the NuGet packages for solution. So it brings up this interface here that we can work with. We're going to go to the Browse tab, and then we're going to look for this tool, Microsoft Entity Framework Core in memory is what we're looking for. So we're going to go to Browse. And then what might be easiest here, and I'm just giving you a tip, is you could just copy paste it from here rather than worrying about typing it, or you could start typing it and it should narrow it down, but there you see it right there. All right, so now that we have that selected, we're going to go ahead and select where we're installing it. And we're going to go ahead and click install. We're going with the latest stable version. I don't know if they're suggesting that here. The latest version 7 available. Okay. And so they had version 7. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm reading that right. It says follow the preceding instructions, blah, 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 package with the latest version 7 available. Okay, so in other words, don't use any version 8, go to the latest version of 7. And that's how I'm reading it. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and click install. And what this does is it will add this set of tools, and you can see all the different stuff that it's adding in, right? And then we're just going to go ahead and hit apply. Right? Some of these have little license agreements and stuff, so we're going to hit accept. And now it's adding all that functionality to our app. Very typical when you're doing building in this environment that you add tools like that. If you're really curious, what does the Entity Framework do? It's one of the key tools that we use for basically working with data in an application. The Entity Framework is almost always present when we're doing any sort of database work or external file work where we're reading and writing to a file. All right, let's move on at this point to the fact that let's just do this first step and then we're gonna have to call it because we're at time already. It says in the project folder, create a file name todo.cs with the following code. All right, so somewhere in the project folder. So I'm going to come here. I am going to close the NuGet package manager. And then where I'm going to choose to put this is right in the root. You know, that's how I'm reading it. So I'm just going to right click here. I'm going to add a new file. This is going to be a class file, so it's going to be a CS file. If your right click on the add there gives you this as an option, the class, that's what we're adding. So we're adding a class file. So click that if you have it. If you don't have that option, you can go to new item and find that. So it assumes a class file. What does it ask us to name it? To do with a capital T, so to do, and then we're going to click add. Right? It's going to create a blank file. What they want us to do next is to basically add these data fields to the class file. So I'm just going to copy that. Now, assuming that you named it all correctly, it should work just fine. Notice that there is a namespace on ours, right? And they didn't really talk about the namespace issue here at all. They also want us to create another file named to-do db with the following code. So we're going to, once again, do the same process. So let's try that process again. This time I'm going to right click add. I'm just going to go right to class, right? Pretty interesting, gives the different interface this time. But I'm just going to go ahead and create to do db and then just click add, and it should make it a CS file. Now I'm also going to grab one more time all of this code here, being really careful. First, I'm going to grab the using statement. I'm not just going to grab it all because it is dumping it into a namespace for whatever reason, even though I clicked the option not to. So we do want to have the using directive up here, right? Inside this set of curly brackets, we will add this code. It will give us an error message, by the way. I'm just going to drop that in. And that's because we have not extended the class with DB context. So now one more time, in C#, if you guys remember from our 1 week intro on the language, this is how we add a superclass. So DB context is a superclass. If you want to compare to Java, it's like saying application or whatever extends application. This time we're pulling in database stuff. Right. Make sure at this point that you save all your work. So I'm going to the file menu and choosing save all. Right. At this point, frankly, we're running out of time, but this would be your next step, right, is to add all of this code to the program.cs file. And you know what, since I'm here doing it, why don't we just go ahead and just grab all this. So I'm going to grab all of it, and I'm just going to replace what's in my program.cs file. I do always forget to click the little copy button here, which is probably easier. Okay, I'll just go ahead and copy it that way. And over to program.cs, select all, and then just paste in the new code. No red underlines, wonderful. Oh, only one, okay. All right, this is a great place to stop then, right? Because we're out of time and I don't have a lot of time to fix it. So folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here, and what we'll do is we'll pick up next week and we'll continue on this tutorial. You can, of course, continue it on your own.